So, all right, gardeners, what is all of the fuss about this new purple tomato? Well, stay tuned and I'll share with you all of my opinions on this new GMO seed available to home gardeners. Thank you so much for joining with me here today for this video. And if you can, right at the top here, hit that thumbs up, click the like button, click the subscribe button as well so that you can follow along with all of our fun garden adventures here on the Urban Gardener channel. We're just finishing up my live stream here, the Let's Get Growing show, and I had some thoughts on this new GMO purple tomato. So I thought I would clip that out and share that with you here today. But before we get started with that, I did want to take another minute here just to remind you that we do have this amazing gardening show on the weekends, starting at Saturdays, 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and now this year, Sundays as well at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And you can join us for the Let's Get Growing show, where we get to talk to and interview some of the gardening world's most amazing gardeners and have some really awesome live conversations that you can join in with us right here live on the channel each and every weekend. We've had some really great guests on our show this last year. We had Gary Pilarchik of the Rusted Garden. We had John Kohler of growingyourgreens.com. Ashley Thomas, the Mocha Gardener. We had farmer Greg Peterson and gardener Scott, and many, many more really awesome gardeners to talk to on our show. So again, I really encourage you all to come and join with us live on Saturdays and Sundays so that you can meet some of these really awesome gardeners, ask some of your own questions about your gardens, all sorts of great, awesome things that we can talk about and discuss with these great gardeners. So please come and join with us. So now, what's up with this tomato?
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
Lots of big news going on in the gardening world. This last year, we had the new USDA hardiness zone map. We've had some world records broken, from the largest ever squash and the hottest pepper, fun things like that. One of the big things that happened basically this last week or so in the gardening world was the announcement of the Norfolk purple tomato. Oh my, oh my. It's a GMO tomato that has been released to the general gardening public. Yes, a GMO tomato. And again, too, as I've been watching videos of all sorts of different YouTubers and gardeners, people, I really respect and listen to a lot of content, a lot of different people out there with varying different viewpoints and thoughts on this. But one of the most common things that all of people who share content in the gardening world, who whether they're on Instagram or YouTube or other places as well too, one of the things that's really common of folks is that we have for years always kind of tried to push back on the idea that you could purchase GMO seeds. One of the things, and when I was early on learning about this, I used to actually think, like, why do all of these seed catalogs put GMO verified, have these sort of like things that they put all over and have these different stamps of approval on their packaging that they have for the stuff if GMO seeds were not available to the general public. So I used to think a lot about that. But then I started to realize after a while through listening to some other opinions and discussions that really a lot of that reasoning is because of the general public. It isn't the company themselves. I'm sure the company would not have to would like to not have to worry about those sort of things themselves, but it's the general public. It's the purchasing public who don't know and understand a lot about GMOs. There's a lot of fear around GMOs. There's a lot of truth around GMOs as well too. There's a lot out there. So people, don't know and understand a lot about that. They hear genetically modified, and so that creates a lot of assumptions that are made at that point. And so seed companies would put these verifications on their seed packets in order to just assure the purchasing public that things are going to be all right, even though they knew that they couldn't sell genetically modified organisms, genetically modified seeds to the general public. That just was not anything possible. And again, too, this is one of the most common things as I'm watching all these videos of all of these different gardeners and YouTubers who are putting videos out with their take on this new genetically modified purple tomato. And that is now one of the things that all of us have to kind of recognize and deal with. I think it's probably one of the bigger things about this story, is that now that it's out there. We can't, as all I was watching a video with from Jess from Roots and Refuge. Brian over at Next Level Gardening has a really great video on this too. In fact, if I think about it, or maybe even Jay might put some links for us in the chat there, of Jess's from Roots and Refuge's recent video that she did talking about the genetically modified tomato. And Brian over at Next Level Gardening had a really interesting take as well too. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as well too, as we kind of get into my take when it comes to the genetically modified purple tomato and some of the different things that are going on about this. One of the things I'm just going to say right up front, so there's no mystery when it comes down to it. Uh, I don't and had been very critical of the idea of genetically modified plants and organisms based on certain things that I know and understand of a lot of the already available commercial genetically modified organisms. Now, with that said, I would grow the purple tomato. Absolutely would. I would love to check it out. I'm a plant lover. I'm a grower when it comes down to it. I would love to grow this out. I would love to see what it looks like, and I would even eat it. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a little bit, but I want to just kind of be upfront about that before we get into really this full discussion here. Another thing I'll also mention as well too, and again, we've already kind of talked about this at the front of our show already, as we've talked about the new season of our show getting started. One of the guests that we are working on and planning and scheduling for one of our future shows is the lady who developed this purple tomato at the Norfolk laboratory, I guess you would say, over in the UK, I believe. And she is going. In fact, we just got an email the other day, and I'm going to be working on setting up the actual date. And but she's going to be doing a little tour here in the States, so we might catch her while she's here in the States. And have a conversation with her all about the science and all of the details behind all of this sort of stuff, so we can really hear from the person who actually developed this tomato. I think it's worthwhile listening and getting to hear about how all of this is developed, what their take on the development of this tomato, what their intentions for the tomato are as it's being introduced to the wider world, the gardening public. So that I think is going to be a great conversation. So I really will be talking a lot more about that as that conversation starts to come up. So definitely, if you haven't subscribed to the channel or follow along, get notifications or anything like that, definitely do that. Follow along so that you can be here on the Let's Get Growing show as we have that scientist, plant scientist on our show to talk all about how they developed that purple tomato. We'll have some other takes and things like that as we move forward as well to talk about though too. But again, really, that is just one of the biggest things about it. I've always stood that ground. Hey, there's no reason to worry about genetically modified anything. A lot of people believe that most anything can be a genetically modified organism. There's so many people in the chats and the discussions and posts and comment sections that I attend at times on social media and listen to a lot of people and what they talk about when it comes to genetically modified organisms. And you can definitely see there's a lot of people who have some really, really firm black and white opinions about genetically modified organisms. And with everything out there, there's a ton of gray area. It's about how do we interpret that gray area, and that really makes for what should be really pushing our opinions forward on different things. And as we'll discuss here too, about the actual process and what genetically modified organisms are, and what would lead me to want to grow this tomato is hopefully you'll understand. First of all, the science and that I know and understand about genetically modified organisms, and unlike what a lot of people believe, as I've said, is that there are really only a handful of genetically modified crops that are grown by large scale commercial farmers who sign contracts and pay for seed, and they pay for seed on a yearly basis. They're not even allowed to save seed. So this is these are, and they're just a handful of crops: beets, soybeans, corn, just to name a couple there, but only just a couple of others that you're going to find in the U.S. market as far as a genetically modified crop. There are more that are working and coming onto the market for different things. And it's in these ones, in the research of these sort of ones, that gives me the refrain and where I pull back. Um, because to me, the science, I'm right along with most everybody out there when I look at the idea of what they do with putting together a genetically modified organism. It's not, as people like confuse as well too, with natural modifications, natural genetic modifications. There's an N before the GMO when we're talking about those things specifically, and we should start adding that in GMOs, natural genetic modifications. That happens in nature all the time. It's happening right now as we speak. There are modifications happening naturally in the plant world, the animal world, all over the place. This is just a part of our genetic existence. But to have things where you have two different organisms that they can't combine their DNA. It's unnatural for them to do so. They're just not natural. You know, Not naturally able to cross with something. You know. And a lot of this that I've learned in the early science has been with these, and I can't really, and I was looking for something here just kind of briefly. I wished I could have found that, and maybe that we can find maybe some little bit more deeper information for people who want to look into it a little bit more. But corn, for instance, being crossed with another like bacteria. In fact, I think one of them is BT, Bacterium thuringiensis. I'm not sure that's right, but BT is a naturally occurring and considered organic pesticide that you can use in most organic farms. A lot of organic people don't do that. Myself, I don't use most anything in my organic garden. I am almost a purist in my organic garden when I'm doing things. But BT really, is something that's naturally occurring in our soil. In fact, I'm sure Adam could confirm that as a soil scientist himself. This is a bacteria. This is something, and they take it, utilizing it into another bacteria that they can insert into the DNA of the corn in order to, make it more pest resistant, to give it those genetic qualities of that bacteria that would naturally be a natural pesticide in nature, and utilizing that in the corn in order to make it more pest resistant. Now, even though those things are two different things, and this is where we're going to get some real nuance in here as well too. But even though those things are kind of would be considered organic. You have an organic corn seed, or organic BT bacteria that does its thing in nature. When you're taking these two things and crossing them and putting them together for this other purpose, in the science, it makes sense. There's places that could probably use higher corn production. I think there's probably way too much corn production in the world. We probably need tons less. I don't even know, but there's people who need food, I suppose, and this is the reasoning behind a lot of this stuff. This is a lot what Jess from Roots and Refuge gets into, and I agree with her a lot on this part of it. Is this corporatized sense of doing things for these large scale productions, but in some senses, is it necessary for certain places that are starving for food? I don't know. I truly believe there's more food than available to us than what we're actually utilizing. I think some of the more scarier statistics that you can find out there are the food waste that actually happens. And when you think of people who are needing food, I immediately go to food waste more than I think about the idea of upping production of corn through genetically modified organisms. Okay. Other ones, though, too, where it gets even worse. Where it gets even worse is there are modifications that make these crops resistance to actual pesticides, so that not the corn plant resisting pests itself, but actually having corn or soy or beets or any of these other crops resistant to glyphosates. This is disgusting. I mean, because here's the point here. Now, I don't want anything to do with that. I don't want, and I want to stay as far away from having any of that in my food as possible, for sure. I mean, because here's the idea behind that. It's not necessarily the food. If you can get it completely clean without any pesticides applied to it all, the questions behind whether or not that's actually okay to eat. The science hasn't bared out enough time for us to know completely. But the worst end of that whole issue is that these crops are being sprayed down with glyphosates. You know, all this food is poisoned with these nasty, disgusting, gross chemicals, cancer causing. We are known to be and there's enough science out about glyphosates and these chemicals for us to know and understand that they are dangerous. They are completely and totally dangerous. So to create genetically modified crops that are resistant to glyphosate and pesticide application, because that just means all of the food has been poisoned, more so than the actual modification itself and worrying about that. So when it comes to all of that sort of stuff, it, I get completely why people are resistant and have a negative viewpoint of genetically modified organisms, GMOs. In fact, it makes a lot of sense why a lot of people will take just basic information about those sort of things and then kind of and apply it to everything else because they just don't want it. They just don't want it at all. They don't want to take a risk of it anywhere. And so going back to those seed packets, even though it wasn't available to home gardeners, um, it it was still needed to be on the package in order to assure people that they're not running the risk of those sort of things when you hear about that. Another big thing, though, too. I think one of the things I found is a very negative thing about genetically modified organisms and these large commercial companies and farms that do this is the stories that I was hearing about early on about corn. Now, again, to the one caveat to all of the available seed, when we would say that there are no genetically modified seed available to home gardeners out there prior to this new tomato. Um, was always came with kind of that caveat, I think, with corn. And then made that kind of symbol, it was genetically modified, because corn was always the risk, really, because it pollinates and crosses so easily, and as it pollinates through the wind in large groupings, and you can imagine massive acreage of these large scale genetically modified corn crops. When those pollen tassels start popping out and that pollen starts coming out in probably clouds that you would probably see flowing all over the place if you were able to really observe this. I'm sure it can even be observed. But imagine those pollen clouds moving over to some small market gardener, some small scale, small family farm who has a some heirloom corn that they've been growing for generations, and this massive cloud, just because of the wind direction that day, pushes those pollen into your farm, and then you don't think anything of it. In fact, you don't think anything of it at all. You're not even really sure or know it really actually happened. You save your seed, you go and you plant out next year, but these companies send out folks who'll go around knowing that this situation can happen, and they'll find ways to get a hold of your corn and find ways to test it to find and see whether or not the gene of their trademarked organism that they own is in your family farm or your small market garden, and force you then to remove all of your crop and to get rid of all of your seed and basically start from scratch. And people were being sued by these companies like Monsanto and others who are developing these genetically modified organisms and losing crops. And when you hear about those stories, it doesn't make me happy about genetically modified organisms at all. It gives me a negative viewpoint. I can totally get why people, have a real resistance to genetically modified organisms. I mean, when you think about that sort of stuff, absolutely. But I'm going to come back to the point I made early on, is that when the opportunity to get a hold of some Norfolk purple tomato seeds comes available and for me to grow them in my garden, I will. And I'm going to try them out. I'm going to check out and see how the plants grow and all of that. Like I said, I'm a grower. I have a passion for gardening. I do grow a ton of my own food, and I love growing my own food and supplementing the food that I have available to me through my own garden space, and grown through my own hands, and the seeds that I save and collect or purchase from reputable seed sources, and all of that. So, but I'm excited about the idea of being able to grow this new tomato. You know, that's kind of my take on it, just as an initial take. You know, I'm going to dig a little bit more into that. There is just a little bit more news when it comes down to it. Um, is that Actually, you know what? Real quick before I mention that, I did also, and I do believe Jay did put links in our discussion. I'm going to try to make sure as I put. I think I'm going to put this out as a separate video, maybe, but I will be sure to maybe put some links down below in the comments for everybody down below for some of those videos I'm talking about. Jess's video take that she has on the purple tomato over at Roots and Refuge. I'll put a link down below to that. I'll put a link down below to Brian's take on it over at Next Level Gardening. And then as well to maybe some links to the NPR article which initiated all of this release, and as well as some other things that we'll talk about as well. Again, too, Brian over at Next Level Gardening had a really great take, I think, about just the idea that now that this tomato is out, what does that mean for the future? And Jess kind of touched on that a little bit too, and I think that's kind of where the more interesting aspect of all of this goes, and where now, in kind of talking about what we were talking about with the seed packets and these verifications and things like that, it's going to be more. We're going to have to be more aware, and that's what it's going to have to be. Is we're going to have to be more aware of what it is, what are these modifications, and that sort of stuff, as we'll talk about this purple tomato just a little bit more. What are they? What do they mean? What's the purpose behind it too? Because I think these are going to be some great questions we'll have with the creator of this tomato seed variety. And talk about, you know, kind of what are these intentions, what are these sort of things as it's meant to go out to the public. This tomato, although they're offering it right now as an initial offering to the public at $20 for 10 seeds, I'm sure they're trying to look maybe as this initial public offering to maybe get some money back in their research and development and that sort of stuff. We'll ask about that sort of stuff, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. But once it's out there, it's out there. Once these seeds get going, a big question I want to know right off the bat: are they already pretty much open pollinated, or are these going to be more like a hybrid offering of tomato seeds where you have to buy tomato seeds new each year? See, these are going to be the big questions that I think they're really going to formulate probably a more solid opinion on this new tomato variety. But once this gets out there, it's going to be out there. And that kind of brings us to the next part of this story. Now, I have shown this and one of the things you'll hear on my channel all the time. In fact, it's been a part of the history of my channel, as I've talked about it and explained to it before. When I first started my channel, one of my biggest goals of the year for my first year of making videos was to first be consistent. But if I was able to do that, I was going to reward myself with a trip down to California to go to the National Heirloom Exposition and to get to see all of these awesome things that I'd been following along with on different videos by like John Kohler and other YouTubers in the gardening world. So I wanted to go do that, and I was already just a huge fan of Baker Creek, their whole seed catalog, all of their seeds I'd been growing already for years. And so ultimately, I'm a huge fan of Baker Creek Heirloom Seed Company. And I'll show you this. This was this year's. I'm trying to get off the light here a little bit, but this was this year's Baker Creek's free seed catalog. This isn't the whole seed catalog. The whole seed catalog is a much bigger. I don't have it with me right here at the moment, but it's a much bigger catalog, more in depth, more content, that sort of thing. But look at that deep purple looking tomato. And this was the first thing I thought about when the Norfolk tomato came out and they made that announcement. And I was reading that article, that NPR article about it, was the Baker Creek cover and this delicious purple tomato that I saw as an heirloom. And I was just excited. I was like, look at that color. I was so excited about the possibility of being able to grow out this tomato. I mean, you see anything of like that, it's just fascinating. And if you're a passionate gardener like myself, this is just intriguing. And just I want to, grow this thing as soon as I saw it. And yeah, so and I should have got in right away and started ordering seeds. I know some people out there already got some seeds because Baker Creek this last week just announced that they are discontinuing the um, what is this? This is the Purple Galaxy, is what they called it. The Purple Galaxy tomato, the truly purple tomato, they called it. And they sourced this seed from a seed source out of, I believe, the UK. And as we get talking about this, will make more sense. But yeah, they put out a big, lengthy press release, and I'll just show you here. Baker Creek discontinues the Purple Galaxy tomato. Baker Creek regrets to inform you that we will not sell seeds of the Purple Galaxy tomato, which we previewed in our 2024 catalogs. After repeated testing, we are unable to conclusively establish that the Purple Galaxy does not contain any genes that have been genetically modified. Baker Creek remains steadfast in its commitment to selling only heirloom and open pollinated, non genetically modified varieties. So, and it goes on to talk about all sorts of things. They actually kind of get into some of the science and some of these things as we've already kind of talked about. One of the interesting things that kind of came out about this, and it makes me kind of a little more interested. We kind of talked and touched on this a little bit in the pepper world, as some of these new hot varieties were about to come out on the market through this show. uh, uh, Ed Curry put out the new Pepper X and broke the Pepper X record. And it was kind of like they were releasing things to release because others had released something. And I think they had to get that purple, and this is just my opinion first, as just from a first reading of this situation, is that they had to get that purple tomato, the Norfolk tomato, out in order to push back and also do what they wanted to do as far as making it available to the public, to what was being put out through Baker Creek. And Norfolk, from what I understand, the Norfolk laboratories sent notice to Baker Creek that they believe that this tomato could contain genes from its purple tomato that it has its patent on. And see, and this becomes one of those issues. So therefore, and I'm more interested when we get into this conversation with the developer of the seed in this tomato variety about what, because what it is when it comes to how this seed is going to be available to the public as we move forward into the future, because this is going to be the case. There are going to be people who are going to cross these, and they're going to make newer varieties. They're going to come up with new names like Purple Galaxy, and these sort of things are going to be possible. Or is, if anybody starts putting these out, are there going to be these cease and desist types notices and these sort of things like that? So I'm kind of really interested where it goes like that, because from what we can tell here, that there isn't any sort of cease and desist. This was a notification by Norfolk to Baker Creek that they believe that there was a connection to their tomato variety that they hadn't released yet. So they wanted to get testing on that. And for Baker Creek's purpose, they don't want to be selling a genetically modified tomato variety. They're a company that does heirloom tomatoes. And heirlooms are just basically open pollinated seed varieties with these really awesome stories. And Baker Creek does an amazing job at telling these stories about all of these different tomato varieties that they collect and they procure in order to sell to all of us who get the opportunity to buy from them all of these wonderful, awesome, delicious varieties. And again, too, when it comes to color and diversity of color in your garden, you're going to find no better place than Baker Creek than to find some of that sort of stuff. And mind you, I'm going to tell you, and I'm going on about Baker Creek here. I want you to know, Jared's been a guest on my show here, the Let's Get Growing show this last year. He's been a guest that I've interviewed on our heirloom videos that we've done at our different heirloom visits. Jer is a really awesome person that I've gotten to meet and know as a person. So I have a connection to the company in that sort of way. But Baker Creek does not pay me, does not pay us to sponsor anything. I just, this is just my opinion on these on this situation with this tomato. My my reading of the science on genetically modified organisms, and again, my trust, I guess you would say, in the Baker Creek Heirloom Seed Company. I've grown tons and tons of varieties from their company, and will continue to do so, even though they had a situation here with this seed buyer. Baker Creek doesn't grow all of the varieties that they sell in their catalog. Most seed companies don't grow most of the seeds that they sell. They get these, they procure these from other seed growers, and seed growers from around the world. Especially in Baker Creek's case, they're procuring varieties that we haven't seen here in the States, because they've got seed hunters out there looking for seeds in these different varieties in all different countries around the world, and are bringing us some of this sort of stuff. And in this situation, it's just interesting that these kind of things converged all at this same time, that that they would find this just beautiful purple colored tomato, and then weeks later here, or I guess it would be a few months later, because I'm sure they had to go through all the testing and confirm and be ready, and then the Norfolk company to release their purple tomato. But again, we're getting into that ownership and of that seed variety and that sort of thing. And so there's things and interesting questions about that, and I still got some questions. But when it comes down to this actual variety of purple tomato, the from the most I understand in its genetic modification is that this are two different organisms. Is, I guess you would say, it's a GMO, genetically modified organism, two different organisms, but both in the plant world, and both completely edible. You know what I mean? So it's just like, crossing a tomato with a pepper, or a cucumber with a pepper, or something like that. You know what I mean? To take maybe a trait from one of these different varieties and cross them. These are just two things that, just in the natural world, you can put them together. You can put the pollen together as much as you want. Try to join the male and female flowers as much as you want. They're just not going to naturally modify. They're just not going to do that. You would actually have to get in there and do some gene splicing, and go in there and get a piece of that DNA, and through some bacteria, insert it into that, which then you can insert into the new parent plant, and then hopefully breed out in those new seeds a new variety of plant with those new traits from that other plant variety. So now when we get into some of that sort of stuff, I'm thinking, now this is starting to sound interesting to me. You know what I mean? This is starting to really sound interesting to me. I love to see what a cross between a cucumber and a pepper is, or a pumpkin and a tomato, or something. I don't know. Just let your imagination go when it comes to completely edible plants. And how much fun you could have if you could kind of put some things together and see what you could kind of come up with. And again, too, there's questions that come around that sort of stuff too, and I ponder those. In my opinion, as it stands right now, is could very well change. It could very well change in the coming weeks as I continue to read more. There's going to be more we're going to get to know about this stuff. This is all pretty new. This stuff is just kind of happening. So there's going to be more about this that we're going to hear about. In my opinion, and my mind is completely open, to hearing what is said about it. I'm excited to talk with the developer of the purple tomato, the scientist who developed that in a lab other than a garden. So, I've got tons of questions when it comes to that. And a lot of that stuff kind of fascinates me, you know? And at the same time, so, what I mean, there's the white where the black is, what we talked about just a little bit earlier. All of this really crazy stuff, pesticides, glyphosates, and commercial, large scale food industry type questions when it comes to some of that sort of stuff. But when you're getting down to just your home garden and growing ourselves, and we're in a purple tomato that gets its color from the purple color of an edible snapdragon. Now I'm kind of fascinated. Now I'm really kind of interested, as well as I said, those questions around marketing and the situation with Baker Creek and stuff like that. As we'll dig a little bit deeper into as we move closer to that interview, and hopefully I'll be able to get a take from a few other people that we'll be able to share with all of you guys and stuff. But I thought Brian again too from Next Level Gardening, just really it was the more interesting take to me, was just the idea that now that it's introduced, what does that mean? Are we going to now allow ourselves to get used to the idea that these are available to home gardeners, then more varieties start becoming available, and so then we're not then we could possibly allow one of these more questionable genetically modified type varieties like we're talking about with those corn or soy, or these sort of what they're resistant to and why they're resistant to it, what organisms were they crossed with each other, and that sort of stuff. These sort of things I think are going to become really bigger details for us as we move forward as home gardeners. But right now I still don't think that we need to be really raising the alarms quite yet about the dangers and all of this sort of stuff, or anything being really imminent or happening right away. I mean, I think there's a lot of questions still, a lot of things to be found out, a lot of things to learn, but at the same time, this stuff is going to happen anyways. This was all inevitable, really. The science, it was started way back in the 80s when it came to doing genetically modified DNA transfers, and it's only something that's going to continue to develop even more. It's just something that we're going to have to be aware of. We're going to have to start learning more about. Again, too, I'm not a huge scientist myself. I only have a home gardener's understanding from what I've read about things about this, and ultimately, when it comes down to it, like I said, I'm going to grow this thing. I'm going to check it out. I'm going to do that, but I'm also going to be aware of all of these other sort of negative factors, as I well am, of the things that make me resistant to ideas of genetically modified organisms in our food system, and then again too as we move forward more in our home gardens.
So, all right, there you go. Just a bunch of rambling on about what my thoughts are on GMOs, this whole new tomato, and all of that. But one of the things I just wanted to make clear here as we're ending in the video is kind of what I mentioned there during the discussion, is that this science and all this sort of stuff with genetically modified organisms, that started all the way back in the 80s. And I've had it mentioned to me and have read about how this is sort of a Pandora's box. But the point there is that if it's a Pandora's box, it's already been opened. It's already been opened way back when I was just a little one. So these are things that are just inevitable. They're going to happen. The idea that there's this new genetically modified tomato available to home gardeners is something that ultimately was inevitable. And it's inevitable that there's going to be more of these seeds and more varieties of different things that are going to be available as genetically modified plants that are going to be available to us here as home gardeners. So we've got to be aware of what they are, what they're made of, and learn just a bit more about what this whole process is about, because it is going to be more prevalent in the future. So again, as far as this one's concerned, it's just one tomato so far, and I'd like to try it out. I'd like to grow it, but if they start putting some, poison resistant type of things out there, I'm going to be a lot more aware of those things, and I'll be definitely making sure that I'm not letting those into my garden space as well too. But again, like I said, it's really all up to us as individuals and what we want in our garden spaces. And I fault nobody for not wanting anything to do with any GMO as well too. But again, there's some of us out there who are just fascinated and interested, and we're going to check them out. But again, thank you so much for joining with me here today for this video and listening to my opinion and thoughts on all of this. I'd love to hear about your opinions and your thoughts about all of this. So get down into that comment section below. Let me know what you think. And if you are here right now, click that like button, hit the thumbs up, and click the subscribe button as well to follow along with all of our garden adventures here on the Urban Gardener channel. And I'll see all of you on our next video.
Yeah, you're right. I talk too much. I also listen too much.